Hi everyone, Eric Lewis here, and today we are going to talk about how to mount a scope. And I'm taking a little bit of a different approach with this because you can look these videos up all day long. I'm going to talk about a less mentioned way to mount a scope, which is kind of what most people are going to be working with when they get their new gun. This is the way I grew up doing it. Not saying it's right. There are better ways, but not everyone has access to the tools that are mentioned most of the time in the videos that you may have seen out there. A lot of times, they're talking about, torquing all of your scope rings to spec, all of that stuff. I understand its importance and I'm not trying to belittle that, but a lot of people, maybe they don't have the ability to go out and get a torque wrench, or maybe they just want to get out and shoot and they're not that concerned with it. So what I'm going to show you is kind of the more lax way to go about this. So I've already mounted this scope up to the rings, but there was a couple of things that I want to show you. And the reason that I did is just to save a little bit of time because these are very strong mounts and there are a lot of screws and it would just take a while for you to watch me do this. The biggest thing that you have to ensure is that you get your scope straight. You want to make sure that your dials are on the proper sides. You can take your caps off and you'll be able to see the up-down adjustments as well as right-left. You want right and left on the side and you want the up-down on top. But if you do get your scope crooked at all in these, your adjustments aren't going to work correctly. Let's say you're moving your reticle up. If it's crooked, possibly a little bit like this, when you move it up, it's going to move up and left. So you have to be very conscientious of that. Get it as straight as you possibly can, which generally, just eyeballing it works pretty well. When you tighten these, it is a big deal to get them tight if you don't have torque wrenches and things like that. But you do not want to over tighten them. You can ruin your scope if you do that. So take your time, make sure they're secure. On rings like this with multiple different screws, start and kind of work like you would on a vehicle's, when you're changing the wheel on a car. Like you want to kind of alternate across so that way it's even pressure down and it's not torquing one side or the other, because that can cause issues later down the road. Just make sure you get it good and secure, and then you're good to go in terms of mounting it to your rifle. Now that you've got the rings on your scope, it's time to mount it to the firearm. We're working with this awesome Tikka today. Can't wait to get to the range and get it sighted in and try it out. But basically there are a couple of things, and I want to point out some things that we ran into. With this setup that we had, the scope mounts that we had were a little bit shorter than the scope's objective would allow on the end. So we put these risers on there to give a little bit more clearance. Now, when you're mounting a scope, you always want the scope as close to the barrel as you can possibly get it, just because the further the distance is between the barrel height and the scope, the harder it is to get it accurate. And it's just one of those things that you want as close to the barrel as possible to ensure the most accuracy out of your rifle. So with this particular setup, basically we get the scope mounted onto the Picatinny rail. If you're shooting a traditional bolt action hunting rifle, something like that, it's going to be a little bit different mounting system, but typically with these modular ones, you're working with a Picatinny rail. So once we've got the risers installed so that we have proper clearance, we're going to go ahead and get this lined up, and you want to just make sure you can see through it. You want to make sure that the gap is going to allow your screw to go through there. Get the clamp on. And this is another one of those points where if you do have a torque wrench, it's good to always do this to spec. But like I said, not everyone has access to those types of tools. I've had rifles my entire life that I've mounted the scopes this exact way and never had a single issue with, even if they have had a little bit of a bump to the scope or something like that. So you'll be just fine doing it this way. But like I said, it is always best to follow the manufacturer's recommendations so that way it's as strong and as as perfect as possible, especially if you're looking at shooting really, really long range stuff. But if you're just going out hunting, this is just fine. All right, so I've got everything secure. Going to double check everything. I'll run back over these, make sure they're all secure and none of them have loosened when I was torquing them down. And we're going to head to the range, get this sighted in, and put a few rounds through our Tikka.